My name is Nancy Fulton. I currently run events for more than 40,000 entertainment industry pros, writers, screenwriters, filmmakers, performers, and other creative entrepreneurs who are interested in making media or selling their expertise on and offline. And today I'm speaking with Bruce watchNHT, and we're going to be talking about PR and about how to promote books and films and podcasts in addition to that via traditional PR techniques, and also, the new and improved PR techniques that come along from the internet and from social media. So with that in mind, Bruce, do you want to go ahead and talk for a few minutes about how you began your life working in PR?
Sure. Thanks, Nancy, first for doing this, for having me on here. And thanks to everyone who took the time to get on live. I hope people will benefit from this, whether you're watching it live or later on. Mm-hmm. My story is really spread over my entire professional career of doing what I call communications, but we'll call it PR for purposes of this talk. And it has really been spread over sports and entertainment for, I don't want to date myself, but probably, let's say, 25 years. Mm-hmm. And it went everywhere from a National Hockey League team mm-hmm. to North America's premier pro indoor lacrosse league, and then I did some work for some different agencies. I was freelancing for full service agencies in Jacksonville, Florida, and then to the Olympics. Wow. So there's an organization for every Olympic sport that is their world governing body. So in my case, I was the director of communications for the International Softball Federation. So that afforded me the opportunity to go to 2 Summer Olympics and be the chief press officer there. And along the way, I was starting my own business, the one that I have now, which is called Now Hear This. Mm-hmm. And Now Hear This was born out of just seeing a young lady whose talent I really admired and trying to merge all the experience that I did have, all my years in promotion and publicity and public relations, and just really good natured, just voluntarily. I just thought people need to hear this girl more. Mm-hmm. And so as we started into that, and I'm trying to give you the shortened version because, the longer version goes into, as we're all used to hearing, mm-hmm. get to know. Mm-hmm. And I think at first they didn't realize that I was willing to do this voluntarily. Mm-hmm. The dad was the one that was helping out his daughter, but mm-hmm. That's a large part of what we're going to talk about today is, mm-hmm. Expertise in areas. Some people can fix their own car and they can mm-hmm. do it good. Other mm-hmm. people kind of guess their way through it, but at the end of the day, you want to go to a certified auto mechanic. And in the case of this young lady, her dad was a realtor. So what did he know about promoting? What did he know about the actual industry of communications, not to mention the entertainment industry? Mm-hmm. So as I started helping her out and we started seeing results, that's when I took a step back and realized, I think I can make a business out of this. So then I kind of turned my attention more towards, and again, this is a large part of what we're going to talk about as well, is having a story to tell, something that's going to get people's attention because they want to know, well, what have you done for me lately? So now I had a success story to tell. I was able to point to results that I got for this young lady, and I was able to start getting clients on my own. Initially, I was purely focused on, when I say just the entertainment industry, too narrow. I was looking at just music. I seemed to be drawn mostly to singer-songwriters, but over the years, I not only started to kind of see the bigger picture and expand my client base, but all the way to the point where now in 2018, I have clients that are performers still, yes, but I have authors who are clients. I have some small businesses. I worked with an Olympic athlete at one point. So, these services are applicable to all these different industries and all these different people. It's just a matter of tailoring it so that, if you went to someone and they said, here's how I can help you with your book, with your film, with whatever it is that you want promoted, and they say, do you want package A, B, or C? Mm-hmm. I would caution you to kind of scratch your head and say, well, this isn't custom tailored to me. And
Mhm.
that's what I pride myself on, is saying, this is what I can do for you, but I'd rather know what are your goals and objectives and what do you want me to accomplish for you, because I could sit here and tell you all these things that I do that aren't relevant to you at all. And maybe it could be 14 things on the list, and it's only when I get down to number 9 and number 10 and number 12 and number 14 that you're going to say, those interest me. But as we're going to talk about during this conversation today, some people won't let you get to number 9. Some people won't let you get to number 2.
Mhm.
You've got to hit people and catch their attention right off the bat. So what I like about my business is that, unlike what I'm doing right now, I don't have to talk about myself. My business is talking about other people and helping people get their message out, whether it's look at this great book that they wrote, look at this great song that they wrote, look at this great, et cetera, et cetera. I enjoy getting to help people. It sounds cliched and corny, but these are people who have realized their dream. And so for me to get to play a role in that means a lot to me. And it's rewarding getting results for them, because I know that this is something that is, I don't want to say near and dear to their heart. This is what they do morning, noon, and night. And I know that, people have moved to Los Angeles to chase that dream. People have moved to New York to chase that dream. People have moved to Nashville to chase that dream. People have moved to Las Vegas to chase that dream. So to me, I realize what's at stake, and it's as much a full-time job for me as it is for them. And I say that in PR, it's a 24-hour-a-day business, that we're always open, because in the types of scenarios, the types of environments that I've worked in, there's always a need for something. I can go back to my days in sports, and the team owner passes away at 11:30 at night, or working for the International Softball Federation, you're dealing with global constituents, and there are major decisions being made at what is maybe 5 o'clock in the morning your time. In Europe, they're doing it at 12 noon. So it's a 24-hour-a-day business for sure.
I agree. I also think that one of the things you said that I think is really meaningful is that the definition of success for anybody who's a media maker. I focus on people that are authors, screenwriters, film producers, performers. I focus on people who are going to be creating media over the course of their whole life. So their objective is not, they can't be successful. No one's going to be successful or become a millionaire from one book or one film or one anything. When you're in the business of creating media, you're in the business of creating an ongoing stream of content. But also inherent in your career is how you define success. So I know many authors who could build a career speaking. They write the kind of books that they write. They can, Tom Wolfe could have decided to become a filmmaker, and instead of turning out those books that he's produced over the years, he could have been churning out documentary films, or he could have been churning out, because he tells true to life stories. So you're choosing how you're going to create your media, which audience you're going to serve. Is it going to be people that read books? Is it going to be people that like films? Choosing the audience you want to serve, defining success so that I could choose to do all of these things, but what do I want to do? What audience do I want to end up with? What do I want my career to be on a day-to-day basis? And I think when people do PR, a lot of times, and especially when they're doing it themselves and they've never done PR before, they don't understand that you get what you ask for. You get what you invest time and money in. If you're lucky, that's what you're going to get. And it'd be terrible to spend all that time and money on something that you don't want because you think that's the only thing that you can have.
What makes it interesting for me is that the people that I work with get to realize that I too am in a position where I hear no all the time. They think just they do, and they hand it off, and they don't understand that when someone's doing PR for you, they're doing all the calls that you would have done if you were doing it yourself. And I know that we've got some specific bullet points we're going to go through. So one of the questions is going to be, what's the difference when you do use a PR person instead of doing it yourself? But my point is that we get to know ourselves, because if I am calling on 10 different media outlets trying to get someone booked for an interview, I'm not going to go 10 for 10. And I talk about this a lot on my podcast, which I'll just talk about quickly if that's all right, Nancy.
Yes, please do. Actually, I want you to.
Great. So I'll put it in the chat window also, but My podcast is called Now Hear This Entertainment. And every week I interview a guest, and this plays into what you were just talking about. I interview what I call a guest who is having success in entertainment. Now, I usually tell people primarily music, but that has started to change a little bit, just like I described that my business has. For instance, I interviewed a director, producer who worked on episodes of Law and Order. I won't give his whole resume, but my point is that we talk about that very idea. You know, people will say, well, what do you mean people who are having success? Well, to me, these people are successful. And sometimes I've contacted guests and say, I would like to have you on my show. And they almost come back with, why did you choose me? Because they are looking themselves in the mirror and saying, am I successful enough that he thinks I should be the featured guest on this show? Because my interviews, my episodes are anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour long, and it's that one guest. Now, this is going to be twofold, what I'm about to say. Number one, it's an example of how you do get someone's attention, but I'm also making a point to continue what I was just saying. So when I tell you that on my show, it's been every week for more than 4.5 years now. We just released episode 252. So I interviewed everyone from Roy Orbison Jr. to the keyboard player for Aerosmith, the guitar player for Garth Brooks, the drummer for Joe Walsh, the trumpet player for Billy Joel. I've had a couple Grammy Award winners, a Rock and Roll Hall of Famer, a Las Vegas headliner, 3 Emmy Award winners, and even people from American Idol, The Voice, America's Got Talent, and The X Factor. So I tell you that, and your eyes get big, and you go, wow, he's interviewed some big-time guests. And again, that's that whole thing of PR. One of the elements of PR that I talk about is the image that you create for people. And especially if you think of the old adage, you only have one chance to make a good first impression on someone. So when I start talking about my podcast and tell people that list, they go, wow, this guy's doing something right. And I've gotten listeners from 138 countries around the world. So they hear those types of guests, they hear that I've gotten listeners from 138 countries, and they form an impression, which is what you want to have happen. You want to right away leave someone with a positive thought about your product, your service, your business, your film, your book, whatever it is.
And you want it to be the right positive thought. In other words, it better be consistent with what, if I tell people that I am a nuclear physicist, but what I really want to do is be a writer, the nuclear physicist thing may be interesting. It may not be a super adverse fact, but it's not going to be the kind of thing that says, yeah, I want to read a book or I want to watch a movie. So you're forming the right impression, delivering exactly the right data to form exactly the right impression is very important.
Yeah, and so the other side of that, you know, as we were talking a few minutes ago about defining success, I will have some people on that I could tell you right now what some of their highlights are, but you're not going to know their name. It may not carry The Voice or American Idol with it. It may not carry award winner with it. But to me, I see what those people have done, and it carries enough weight that to me, they're being successful in their entertainment career. So it is important, Nancy, and I'm glad you made that point, that I think we all strive for perfection, and to the extent that we should, we put a lot of pressure on ourselves. But I think it's okay to once in a while take a step back and say, you know what, I have been pretty successful, and give yourself credit for all the things that you have accomplished. And then take those things, as we're going to talk about in this conversation, take those things and go out and utilize them so that you can get more exposure, and thus you can get more opportunities.
Right. And I think that kind of leads into what we wanted to focus on in this particular topic. And the thing that I said that we were going to address was specifically book and film, because most of the people that I'm working with are writers, screenwriters, filmmakers, and performers. And books and films, people a lot of times find particularly difficult to market. It's good that it's perfect that you have a broader focus than that. And I also think the fact that you have a podcast and you've been successful with it is critical, because I'm recommending people regularly create podcasts and they have no idea how to promote that. They don't understand who that market is, and it's something you can talk about. But the fact is that when you're a creative professional, you have to market yourself. The products and the content that you create have to be actively marketed. And I'd like, as we begin addressing the questions in the topic list, I'd like to talk. Can you address for a few minutes what public relations is and how that's separate, sort of, from marketing as a topic? Like,
Sure.
is public relations a completely different operation than marketing, or is it the case that they're one and the same thing?
Okay, so the first question that we listed for
Mhm.
this was what public relations is and is not. And
Mhm.
this answer will vary greatly depending on who you talk to, because it's like saying who's the best singer of all time or who's the best band of all time. And what I mean by that is there are some answers that you would expect.
Mhm.
Different people will have different versions of them. So I will start by telling you what PR is not.
Mhm.
It's not advertising, which simply is paying to put up a billboard or buying a spot on the radio or buying space in a magazine. It's not, public relations is not sponsorship, which would be if you're trading or there's cash involved. Sometimes it's considered an endorsement, so to speak, if you think of the music industry. I actually say that what Now Hear This does, my company, what I do is communications, writing someone's bio or writing content for their website. I have one client who I will talk to her and I'll say, we're due for a new article on your website. And she'll say, I don't have anything going on. I don't know what we could put up there. And I'll say, yes, you do. And she says, well, what do I have going on? Let's hang up the phone. Let me write that up and email it over to you and you look it over. Because that whole Seinfeld episode of, what did you do today? Nothing. That's a show. So I have a knack for looking deep into what people are doing and saying, that's news. You know it because you're close to it. You're the one working in it every day, but others don't know about it. And those are the types of things mentioned. Just to continue the list of, what is PR? It could be arranging a photo shoot, because those shots are what we as PR people need as part of our efforts to get more notice for our clients. Sometimes as PR people, we're the ones who are dealing with a printer, say for something as small as business cards or flyers, or all the way up to a big project like a stand-up banner that you put at events where you're doing a book signing if you're an author.
Do you weigh in on topics like, would you weigh in on topics like what should the book cover look like, and what should the book blurbs look like on the back of a book, or what should the movie blurb look like when you're promoting a film? Those the
Absolutely, yeah, because and I don't want to do a deep dive into like actually answering what should be on that book cover, because we have a lot of ground to cover. But yes, that is something that PR people do. I have someone that came to me and was all excited and had the big smile on their face and said, here's my book. And I started looking through it, and at the top of every page inside the book, there was a misspelling, because the word sale, like I'm going to make a sale, in the title of the book. And it was correct on the cover, but on every page of the book, they put SAIL instead of SALE. And so that's where it is important to have people like us that look for that kind of thing, because, spell check isn't going to catch that, because it's not spelled wrong. It's just the wrong form of the word. It's like here in Tampa, we have a hockey team, the Tampa Bay Lightning. And if you leave out that first N, it's going to say Tampa Bay Lighting. Well, spell check isn't going to pick that up, because lighting is obviously a word, but who's going to catch that? So that is something that we do. I have a new client that I've just started working with, that as I've started to roll up my sleeves in doing work for her, I've looked at her book on Amazon, I've looked at her book on Barnes & Noble, I've looked at her website, and where you would expect to see a description of what the book is about, it talks all about her. And well, that is not going to entice someone to buy your book. And yes, there is an element that we're going to talk about, Nancy and I, about viewers. What is it that's going to get people's attention to want to buy your book? And some of it is going to be, who are you? But if all you tell them is who you are, they're going to go, okay, pat you on the head, real nice, you did a good job, you wrote a book, but what is your book about?
So is it the case that public relations is actually, PR, public relations is specifically all the aspects, or the aspects of a person's business or a business that interface with humans, like whether it's getting radio show hosts to carry your message, or magazine authors to carry your message, or getting Amazon to carry your message to readers. Is it that layer between the creator or the business and the actual public that you have to communicate to?
It is, because think of all the different touch points. You know, PR is the promotional materials that people have, you know, when they interact with you, they have some takeaway. You know, it's also relationships though, because a lot of people like to throw around the expression, that's just good PR. And if you think of, if someone has helped you out, let's say 3 times, it is just good PR to go support them when they're doing an event that's important to them. You don't go to it standing anything to gain other than showing them that you recognize their accomplishment and you also want to give back for all that they've done for you. And then I throw that term out, give back. Giving back can also be, you know, public relations can also be community relations. But yes, you're right, Nancy, all these different touch points. And as I said before, to me, a large part of it is image. Because if someone goes to your website and that's the first, they're not even interacting with you, but they go and look up your website and it looks like a paint by numbers website, or it says the absolute bare bones minimum, they're going to go, okay, where's the sizzle? This
Well,
isn't
it's kind of like you're not, it seems like this website's not excited about your book. Or I think, and also I think another thing that's a problem for a lot of people who've been creative over a period of years, it's a question of how do you on-ramp people into a complex career? You know, if I was trying to promote Hunter S. Thompson, I mean, like, he's a complicated guy. So how do I start talking about Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas first? Do I start talking about life on the campaign trail? Do I, you know, do I introduce the works first? Do I talk about his place in American society? It's trying to figure out who's his audience and what is it who's his paying audience, I should say, and how do I connect them to this guy? And how do I get other people to carry his message? And who are those people who have the audience that needs to talk to Hunter S. Thompson? So there's this part where you have to analyze a body of work. You know, a lot of times it's not, people don't just, maybe it's just I'm here in Hollywood, but a lot of the people on this call, I can guarantee you, as I'm looking through this list, and a lot of people that have produced, that are working here year after year, they don't just have one thing. They have a complex career. They may be they may have one thing that they're selling most aggressively, one thing they make the most money on, but I think public relations is a complex thing for those guys, because it's not simple. It's not, they have to decide what they're going to present first.
I want to say something to the point that you just made, that they have a lot of different things going on. Follow me on this. One, and I say this as a pet peeve, but it really goes back to image. If you give me a business card and your email address is authorfred@gmail.com, I'm going to look at that and say, Gmail, well, I don't know, is he really an author? What has he actually done? If you give me a business card that says Janet, or actor Janet at hotmail.com, I'm going to say, why don't you have a branded email address? And filmmaker, you probably have a legal business name, so why wouldn't your website and thus your branded email be fredfilmmaker at fredfilmmakerproductions.com? Again, it all goes back to image, and I can give you a first-hand example with this. I took a client to Nashville. I had her performing 4 shows in 4 nights. The last night she got off stage, she got approached by a publisher. There's my manager, let me have him join us. I came over to the conversation. And as we got to talking, this woman was really interested in my client. She said, well, let's definitely follow up and keep in touch. She reached down and tore a corner off of notebook paper and wrote down her name, her telephone number, and then an AOL email address. Now, if you think of someone who goes on a trip maybe for a week, comes back, and they have all these business cards they're going to go through, they get to this scrap of notebook paper. What kind of impression does that scrap of notebook paper make? Secondly, is an at AOL.com email address. So you have no website to go and look up and see what is this publisher all about.
Yep.
And right away, you're going to say, I don't know if I want to do business with that. So if you turn it back on yourself, you know, I had someone come up to me at a podcasting event. Hey, Bruce, here, I want you to check out my show. I looked at it, and it was a Bank of America business card. And I said, what is this business card you're giving me? And they said, oh, I'm sorry, that I work for Bank of America during the day, but you know, I've got this podcast. And they told me verbally what it's about. So if I go home and a couple days later or over the weekend, I'm looking through business cards, I'm going to say, why do I have this business card for someone from Bank of America? And if I remember, oh yeah, this was somebody that has a podcast, how and where am I going to go find that? So it may sound like I'm making a big deal out of this, but it's that important. That could be the difference between you losing out on an opportunity because someone looked at it and said, oh, this must be a hobby. And if you say, no, it's not a hobby, this is my full-time job. I am a full-time filmmaker. I am a full-time author. How are they going to know that? And then they start to ask questions in their head. Well, if they just have a Gmail, you know, are they going to hand me, and they're going to start conjuring up images of second-rate work that they think that you're going to give them.
You know, what's kind of interesting is, so like, it's funny you should mention it because this is actually, so I've been doing marketing for a long time, and I've got, I have Nancy Fulton meetups, and I have I have multiple corporations. It's not good. I mean, it's wonderful, thank God, but it's talk about marketing hassles. But it's funny because, so if you Google Nancy Fulton, I guarantee you I am. There's this one other woman, which everyone knows about. She does paintings, she has nancyfulton.com. But what's interesting is I set up nancyfultonmeetups.com, and whenever I would use Nancy at nancyfultonmeetups.com, I would not get, I didn't get as much of a follow through. If I put nancy.fulton at Yahoo, which I know is stupid, but somehow or other for some reason it's a more personal address. And here in Hollywood, there's this thing, I know somebody's real when I get their real address. So it's a very strange thing, but what you've described, I 100% agree with. And yet I have found that I think part of it's because I'm providing training. There's some sort of a aspect of training or coaching that if I focus, and people go to Nancy Fulton meetups, they hear way too much about it on a regular basis. But you're right that like the alchemy of like, how do you position yourself so people will develop the right relationship with you? It's like, if you're standing up and you're saying, when you're presenting yourself to the marketplace and you're presenting your books to the marketplace, you have to choose what your relationship is going to be like with these people. Are you acting as a coach? Are you acting as a teacher? Are you acting as a documentary filmmaker? Are we doing the Martin Scorsese thing? I am a genius. You know, like there's this whole presentation of who you are and the relationship you're going to have with this audience. You know, it's that is the function of PR. And because you do have to present yourself coherently. And you're right. I used to teach people routinely. I would tell people, you have to have a company name. And they would pick a name and I'd be like, I have no idea what that means. So you pick a company name I don't know what is.
and the other side of it is that if you are an author and you put a book out, if you're a filmmaker and you put out a film and the domain name is just the title of that project, well, what's going to happen when it comes time for your second one?
Yes.
What you're going to use then? So you're really better off just using your name.
Yes.
If it was, in the case of you, if it was just nancyfulton.com, well, now you can position yourself on that website.
Do not get me started. I tell you, that poor woman's 80, 90 years old. I think about it, you know, but she's.
Well, no, I just meant to use one's first and last name as a website address instead of, you know, if your book title was called Out the Door, if you register outthedoor.com and 2 years later you're ready to write another book, well, now it's.
You're 100% right. You're like, I tell people routinely, and if you have a name that's Nancy Fulton, I got online when I was in 1996, so I've had a chance to build the first 10 pages of Google. You will, I guarantee, I will be the first 10 pages of Google. But if you have if you're John Smith, you're not getting johnsmith.com. And if you're calling yourself John Smith and people Google you, they're never going to find you. So if you've got a good middle name, now's the time to, you know, incorporate that into it. And that's just that's branding. So, and you're right, and that's a core part of public relations. And I think it's interesting when I was chatting with you at our first meeting, one of the things I was impressed by was the fact that you've done this on a company basis, and then you've also done it for individuals. And there is that intersection where every creative person creates products. So then how do you create that relationship between the creator and their products, you know?
Yeah, and here's how that has benefited me. You had
Mhm.
asked a question before about the overlap between PR and marketing.
Mhm.
And the other day, I interviewed the executive director for the Grammy Museum for an upcoming episode of my podcast.
Mhm.
The point I was making to him, and you can
Mhm.
see here how this all ties together, is I said, when people hear Grammy Museum, they just think of the Grammy Awards, and they
Mhm.
just artists who have won for their music. But in fact, the Grammy Museum prides themselves on all these educational programs that they have and all that they're doing for students. So there's this educational component of the Grammy Museum. They have to educate people about the educational component. And so I asked him,
Mhm.
how much of a challenge is that to, I don't want to say change the perception, but to further educate people that what our product is not just a facility where you come to see the history of music, but we offer all these other things. And I almost started to answer it for him, because there is an education department and education staff that will work on that, but the marketing people are the one who are actually responsible for the public message that goes out about what exactly is going on inside those walls down there at LA Live.
Mhm.
And if you think about the girl who had set up this interview between myself and the Grammy Museum executive director, well, she's on the communications team, she's on the PR team. So they are very much working together, because of when I toured the Grammy Museum last month or whenever that was, they made sure to hand me a brochure. Here's some information about the Grammy Museum. Here's information about memberships. But the PR person, before they would let the education department or the marketing department send that to print, the PR people would look that over, and
Mhm.
they're not just checking for typos, but they might say, well, hold on, this picture that you're going to put here, that picture is outdated. It was taken 6 years ago. Let's use the new ones that we had done last year. You know,
Mhm.
we're going to say, gee, we're really trying to be consistent with this tagline of this that we've used on the website and we've used in our promotional videos. Let's put it on this brochure somewhere. So
Mhm.
that's how they all come together. And I think that because I have that corporate background,
Mhm.
as well as working in agencies, that's how I'm able to take that down to now I'm just working with someone individually. And I'm not talking about that podcast interview, but when I am working with an individual client, I can talk to him or her about this is what's going to be expected on the other side.
Right. Right. And also follow them from project to project to project. People that are um, writers, actors, producers, performers, they have a belief that because they do communication professionally, and they do, you know, Robin Williams was incredibly great at communicating. Boy, could he communicate well. But they thought, a lot of people think I'm a communicator, so I should be able to handle my own promotion. But are there things that a professional PR person or a professional PR agency can do that an artist working on their own can't do? Are there advantages? What are the advantages of having a third party do those kinds of tasks for you as opposed to trying to do them yourself?
Yeah, and I've seen that too. You know, if you think of songwriters,
Mhm.
you know, they're great at writing songs, and then all of a sudden, like I mentioned, you know, the girl before, all of a sudden it's time for them to write something for their own website, and they can't think of anything, you know, or they write it and you say, let me polish that for you. But
Mhm.
you know, sadly, and this is not wise for me to say as a businessman, but
Mhm.
sadly, a lot of people, a lot of places, a lot of outlets just flat out respond better when they see something coming from an agency. In
Mhm.
my opinion, a filmmaker, an author, an artist, a musician should be able to pick up the phone or write an email and get the same attention that agencies do. But it's just the way that the industry is. They also like having a buffer and getting to speak a little more relaxed, a little more frankly with an agency. You know, look, can your client XYZ, which they wouldn't say if they had you on the phone, and even more so, the agencies will have well-established lists of and or relationships with contacts that artists working alone just wouldn't have. For example, this morning I was sending out a press release for an author client of mine who's actually as part of her business, putting on a 2-day event for entrepreneurs in a couple months. So, on her own, she would have otherwise either not done the release at all. And in fact, when I told her this is what we should do, she says, "Oh my gosh, I didn't even think of that."
Mm-hmm.
So planning this big event and trying to sell tickets to it, yet she never thought of putting out a press release. So she otherwise would have not done it at all, or she would have written it, but then spent valuable time trying to figure out who to send it to.
Mm-hmm.
So she's a new client, and she put her book out a couple months ago, but we're still going to do a press release for that too anyway, because another thing that agencies can do is bring you a lot of creativity, such as with hers, the press release isn't so much going to be about the launch of the book, since it has already been out a couple months, so much as it's going to say how well it has already done sales-wise, plus where she has been in support of it, out speaking. The client should spend all their time doing what they do best.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of, well, I'm a filmmaker, but now I have to put on my PR hat, and then I have to put on my finance hat to be the bookkeeper, and then I have to, and you're spreading yourself thin into all these other things. Why not just focus on what you do, which is being a filmmaker? Why not just focus on being a writer instead of, well, I don't know who to call, but I suppose if I sit down with Google and I look up the TV stations, you're going to get nowhere. I mean, we've all done this over and over, that we know who to ask for. We know what email address not to send it to. I mean, I know little tricks of, some people will go so far as to just look at a website, they can't find an email address, and they stop. And they go, well, I couldn't find an email address.
Mm-hmm.
Did you look anywhere besides the website? Well, no, where else was I supposed to look? And there's so many places that, I turn over a lot of rocks and I find the email addresses just because I have that experience and I know how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But I circle back around to the beginning where I say, unfortunately, it's just the way the business is, that a lot of them, and if you think about it this way, if there's 100 authors that are all calling on the same person, or there are 10 Bruce Wozniaks, they would rather hear from Bruce talking about his clients. They know that, okay, this person has their own publicist, their work is probably pretty good, as opposed to a certain percentage of those 100 that are just winging it, and they really might not actually be that good. Their work might not actually be that good. So if they answer every one of those 100 calls, they're going to have to sit there and listen to some awful pitches, as opposed to the people that this is all they do, and we know to cut right to the chase. We know exactly what they want to hear.
Right. And also the other thing is, you're in a position to bring a lot of context. You're in a position to bring a lot of context very quickly, because someone's not the first person you've ever promoted. They're not the first author. They're not the first musician. They're not the first producer. So you end up, you're starting off at a significant advantage from the very beginning, because you're not starting at ground zero. You're not spending time looking up names right at the beginning, because you already have the names. I want to talk just for a couple of minutes, and this is specifically because you do have a background in podcasts. The podcast marketplace, the podcast target market, the kind of people that listen to podcasts have some very interesting characteristics, and it's making them a very high value target for a lot of big businesses. In fact, there's a company called Wondery, which produces lots and lots and lots of podcasts now. It's run by a Hollywood studio. And so can you talk for a few minutes specifically about why having a podcast makes sense for some people, and also talk for a few seconds about why promoting via podcast may be a good place specifically for filmmakers and authors to go with their marketing.
I'll have to do my best to not get carried away, because I could talk for, I can't tell you how long, because when I first started my podcast, that's all I thought it was supposed to be. I just thought, well, this will be a good marketing tool for my business. Someone will hear it in Springfield, Missouri, and say, this Bruce guy sounds like he knows what he's doing. I should contact him and see if he can promote me from across the miles. And now, as you said, Nancy, it has become, the last figure I heard is approximately approximately, this might be a little high, approximately 600,000 podcasts currently reside on iTunes. Now, at the same time, I believe that only 225,000 of them are actually active, which means a lot of people started podcasts and let it go, but it's still sitting there. But there are so many podcast platforms nowadays that, I was talking to someone the other night and I gave him my business card for my podcast, and I just looked at him and said very point blank, I said, what do you have, an iPhone or an Android? He said, Android. I said, okay. I said, do you have the Stitcher app on your phone? Mm-hmm. Someone told me about that, and I said, just go to the Play Store and download Google Podcasts, and there you go. Because everybody has a smartphone nowadays. Mm-hmm. As you see in the chat window there, I put in the website address for my podcast. You can listen to it. There are some people that will still sit at their laptop and have a podcast playing while they're working, but I made sure that on that website, I put links so people could go get it from iTunes, from Google Play Music, from Stitcher, from SoundCloud, from TuneIn Radio, from Google Podcasts. And so in this day and age where everybody has their phone in their pocket, in their hand, very close by, and they're working out at the gym, or they're walking the dog, or they're driving to work. I mean, especially in LA with how bad the traffic is, it's a great time to listen to podcasts. So why wouldn't you seize that? And then Nancy, as you said, try to niche down into something so specific where someone's going to say, this is right in my wheelhouse.
There's a really popular one about Hollywood murders. It's gotten to be very, 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 very popular. And they basically talk about the famous serial killers here in Hollywood. It's kind of a gruesome gig, but what's interesting is it's got very high production values. And when you look at the demographics for the people that are listening to that podcast, they are Hollywood. They're some of they're influential people here in Hollywood. They have very high incomes. It's a very strange, the podcast market seems to have some unique characteristics in terms of its age and demographic, people that are hard to reach other ways.
Well, and if you get back to the second part of your question, which is the benefits of it. So, on my podcast, what I do every week is two things. Well, there's several things I do, but for purposes of this discussion. So I podcast ahead of time that, look, a large part of this show is done for the people listening who want to learn from people like you. Mm-hmm. So that you don't just say, I got my most recent project entirely crowdfunded. And I say, well, tell us more about that. And they say, oh, I used Kickstarter. Boy, I was so excited. That's great. And I'll drill and say, why did you choose Kickstarter? Did you look at any others? What made you choose them? How difficult was it to be in full self-promotion mode for 30 days consecutively? Or they'll say, I just got placement in film and television. And I'll say, how did you do that? People want to know. And then in the middle of every episode, every week, I give out a tip myself where it's the guest conversation goes to the side. They don't even know it. I record it later on. And I give out a tip for the listeners who are up-and-comers, who are aspiring in the entertainment industry. And I've been fortunate that I've been interviewed on some shows where people have said, I've read these tips, and these are very universal. These aren't specific to a singer-songwriter. You could apply these to a small business. Mm-hmm. And what I've done, and this is one of the benefits of podcasting, is so you already have yourself established as, let's say, an author or a filmmaker. That's great. Okay, but now you can also say podcaster, and then once you're doing those things, you should be out doing speaking engagements to promote your podcast, to promote your book or your film, and of course, everything goes together. So if you're telling people to listen to your podcast and they're listening to your podcast and that's causing them to go buy your book, or it's causing them to go seek out your film work, then you see how everything kind of one feeds the other. And so in my case, I want people to say, this Bruce guy knows his stuff, his tips are really helpful, and they'll go buy my ebook off my website, which is all those tips, so they don't have to go through 250 plus episodes and say, this is an hour show, where did he give out the tip? Because these are really helpful, I want to write it down. But then furthermore, they get to my site and they say, he does video consultations, I should book 30 minutes or 60 minutes with him for a video consultation so that he could look at my stuff and tell me what needs help. And all that just by doing a podcast. But now it makes me not only Bruce Wozniak, who runs Now Hear This Incorporated, PR agency, but because of the podcast, I'm now also a podcaster. I've done speaking engagements in I can't tell you how many different cities now. And then on top of that, because I do have the ebooks, now I can also say that I'm an author. So all these opportunities that you're sitting back and you're wondering, how are all these other people in my arena getting these opportunities? If you can put yourself out there with all those different titles, it makes you more attractive, that people are going to want to do business with you more. People are going to want to know, well, what can we do together? Because you look like you have a lot going on. And that gets back to that at the very beginning. I said PR is so much about image. So this Bruce Wozniak guy, and they say he runs Now Hear This, he has a podcast, he's a speaker, he's an author, he must be doing a lot of things right. He's someone I want to do. You know, for those of you that are scratching your head and saying, why aren't I getting the results? It's because you're not getting the opportunities. And why aren't you getting the opportunities? Because maybe you're limiting yourself so much and you're saying, I'm a great filmmaker. I'm sure you are, but you can't just hang your hat on that one thing. I mean, I'm amazed at these people that I talk to that are a big deal, that come on my podcast, and they're not just doing that one thing. I interviewed someone who, anytime that Phil Collins goes out on tour, she's one of his singers. That's not all she does. And even the people who are, I interviewed the drummer for Pink, and the drummer for Pink, he's a wildly successful corporate speaker. And then of course he has videos, he has books that he sells. So don't limit yourself. Don't paint yourself in the corner and say, but Bruce, this film I made is just the best film out there that people have to know about, because it probably is. You are closing yourself off from those other opportunities, from other avenues that you could go down, so that people will ultimately find out about your film.
Right. Well, and I think, you know, if Hitchcock had made just one film and that's all he ever talked about, he would not be Hitchcock, because you wouldn't know about all the other work he had done. So I just don't think there's any creative professional that doesn't have to have a body of work. And I do agree that when you're a creative professional, you have to decide what your career is about. Are you a mystery writer? Are you creating mysteries? Okay, well, if you're doing mysteries and you're only ever going to put out films, or you're only ever going to write books and it takes you 2 years to write a book, the amount of career you can build is going to be pretty limited. And what's nice about doing a podcast is it's the kind of thing people can put out a podcast a month, or a podcast every 2 weeks. So it allows them to have a direct relationship with their customers. And interestingly enough, if you were to go to donedealpro.com and you were to look at what people are currently licensing, Netflix and Amazon are now licensing podcasts the same way that they license books. So creators are getting big checks for the kind of content that they've packaged into their podcast, specifically because it does have an audience, because people do like it, and because it allowed them to showcase their skills.
Well, and you can see the relevance of all those different things that I just talked about. You could see how they all fit together in terms of the business and the podcast and speaking and ebooks. If I told you that, oh, and by the way, I also do counseling for parents. What does that have to do with, you know, now you're going to confuse people, and they're not going to see the picture that you want them to see. But when you tell them all those different things and how they all work together, it's almost like you have this little, a lot of people will say, well, you're more like a media company. And I say, well, I don't see that, probably because I think of media in the traditional sense of the word, but enough they see how everything fits under that one umbrella. And so I just don't want you folks who are watching this to limit yourself and say, I can't do anything other than filmmaking because it's going to take away from it. No, it's going to complement it. It's going to lead people to what you ultimately want them to see.
I agree. So it's interesting because as you describe more and more about what how your work as a PR professional, it's actually a lot of what managers say. When you hire a manager, it's what you hope the manager will do. They'll help you build a career and determine where you should be investing your time, what projects you should be taking on because they're consistent with your brand. So I just think it's kind of an interesting intersection.
Well, and even right down to something as specific as a couple hours ago, I was talking to a client of mine in Hollywood, and just kind of, weekly update kind of call. And really just a lot of it is counseling as far as, okay, I introduced you to this person. What have you done with that? And then, well, this is what I've done, and it's really kind of having someone on your team that you can bounce it off of so that you're not in this all alone and saying, well, I think I should wait a week until I contact them, or I think I should let them know that I'm going out of town. They don't need to know you're going out of town. They don't. Why not? Well, because then they might say, let's just wait until after the first of the year. And now you've lost out on a potential opportunity. So, as I spoke with her, it was just a matter of hashing out some of those things where it's someone who has your best interest at heart. But again, you can still see through that it goes back around to image, because I said, let's put up that latest video on your YouTube channel. And then when you message that person, you can say, by the way, I don't know if you saw, but recently I performed with so-and-so. Here's a video link, and boom, now they can look something up on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
So it's someone who is really wanting to help you get ahead, but sees it from an outsider's perspective, yet still an outsider's perspective that wants to see you get ahead.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that always doing something also gives you more opportunity to market. If you're doing a podcast, you put a new one out each week, you have an excuse to contact somebody and say, hey, I just did this podcast, I think you'd find it interesting. Or if you were doing video blogs or video content and you're making it available on a regular basis, having a reason to contact people, something new to tell people, is always makes it easier to, it's a good, give you an excuse to reach out to people you otherwise wouldn't reach out to.
Well, you read my mind. You read my mind, because I am such an advocate for what I call interview shows. I would encourage you to do a podcast all by yourself where it's just you talking, because denying yourself the opportunity to do that, Nancy, to meet people who you would otherwise, how else, why would I otherwise have an opportunity to talk to Roy Orbison Jr.? Tonight after this call, I'm going to see someone perform who messaged me at the last minute and said, he's in town from Nashville, just thought it'd be an opportunity to meet. And this is someone that I had on my podcast. So these people become contacts for you. And if you are beating your head against the wall saying, how do I get an audience with this person? I'd really like to talk to so-and-so. And it's not to self-promote, but you're really just starting relationships with these people, and give it time. I mean, eventually it'll work itself out. You don't go into it saying, this is who I am, this is what I do. You say, I would like to talk to you for my podcast because, and it's because of what they bring to your show. And it will come out over time that, you may end up doing something together. But I can't stress enough the value of the context that you get to make from that. And it just, the longer that you keep up your podcast, the more context that you're going to make.
Well, and I also think that comes back to the fact that the nature of media is collaborative, and it's based on being in a community. It's so if you're not as interesting as you could be if you're always standing up only talking about yourself, because yourself can be pretty boring. But if you're saying, I saw this guy's work and everybody should take a look at it, well, that's meaningful. When Robin Williams says this guy is amazing, or when Martin Scorsese says this film is amazing, he's commenting. He's part of the zeitgeist where you have creators referring to creators, and not whether you choose to write articles or choose to do. There's a million different ways that you can actually engage with people and refer people to other creators and engage yourself with other creators. But it puts you in part of that. It puts you in that community, which is otherwise you're isolated and you're cut off, and that's not the nature. It's just not the nature of media. Media is not. People aren't successful that way.
And people appreciate that when they see that you're just trying to be helpful and that you're not doing it for your own personal gain. My client there in Hollywood that I just mentioned a few minutes ago, she and I went to see someone perform that was on my podcast, and I had messaged her before I came to town and said, I'm going to be coming to town. I'd like to see you. And she said, great, I'm performing on this date at this time at this place. And so I brought my client along, and I put the two of them together and stepped aside because I thought the two of you can do a whole lot for one another and benefit from it mutually, that I can step back, and that's all I had to do, but that's of great value to both of them. And I think people appreciate that because they see, well, what does he stand to gain from this? Nothing. That was nice of him. And then they carry on themselves.
Right. When I think that's the nature of being a creator. So when you were going, as we went through this call, you sort of talked about a lot of different tips that filmmakers and writers will find useful, people that are promoting films and promoting books, like, maybe don't build your whole, if you produce a film and make that your main homepage, what are you going to do with your next film? And you also talked about when people are producing books, that, you know, doing a podcast is a good way. If you're doing a podcast, it'll make your book easier to promote. And also it may create relationships that will let you go on other people's shows and in other people's media to talk about your work, your books, and so forth. Are there any other tips that you think people should be aware of as they are, or any other quick tips you can offer people who are promoting books and films?
I made some notes that I do want to try. I know we're up against time here, but it's too important to me that I get these out. So if you'll allow me, I just want to get through these real quick, both for filmmakers and for writers. Is it okay?
Yeah, oh, please do, yeah.
Okay, so for filmmakers, you know, be proud of your work, but don't lie and try to be original. Don't say the most exciting thriller of the year. You know, if that's just your opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And be original means don't use a tagline that's already been used, like, you know, don't go in the water. Why? Is this a Jaws remake? You know, the whole, I think of the whole Got Milk campaign, which got rehashed into so many different taglines, or it became nauseating. But two, while you obviously are going to have a trailer for your film, don't think that that's the end of your promotional work. You know, do you have a flyer for it, or say like 4x6 or a 5x7 postcard for the film? Is there a promotional item that you can print the film's website on and have a logical connection to the movie? So, for example, if you did a film about a killer who uses a screwdriver to stab his victims, maybe you get a small screwdriver, which is practical and can actually use it, but it has blood stains on it. It has the film's website address on it, but it's actually a refrigerator magnet. So people are going to keep it close at hand for when something comes up and they need a screwdriver. Then also be prepared with digital assets that media might request. If someone wants the artwork that you're using in print for promoting the movie, have that ready, and in different sizes and in different file formats. And the same thing for cast headshots and for the trailer when it comes to social media. And I love that we have gone through this whole conversation and we're now talking about social media.
Right.
Because that's not the only place to promote. However, when it comes to social media and your trailer, the various platforms out there are putting a priority on native video right now. What that means is they want you to upload it directly to them, not just to YouTube and then go putting that one YouTube link on all the other sites. So put a 140-second or less trailer directly onto Twitter. Put a 60-second or less trailer directly onto Instagram, and so on for the other big ones, Facebook, LinkedIn. Let me just move really quick into some tips for writers with books that they want to promote, and then I'll be done. So writers who have books, always be promoting your book. Don't feel like the window has closed just because of the amount of time that it has been out. One of my clients, we did the launch event when her book came out over 2 years ago, and I'm still actively booking her into interviews. I'm still actively posting on the book's Facebook page and so on. Who cares? It's what you have to remember, it's the book and its contents that you're promoting, not how long it has been out for. You don't go on an interview and say, well, this is a book that I wrote 3 years ago. Who cares when you wrote it? So I'm encouraging you, get every newspaper, TV, radio, podcast, website interview that you can. I have another author who I just took on as a client 2 months ago. She had seen me, and I haven't spoken about her yet, but she saw me speaking at an event a couple weeks earlier. Her book had been out for 2 years. So what? We're gonna build her a website because she never had one. We're gonna get her booked into interviews and book signings because no one had done it for her previously. But the point is that the message in her book is still as impactful today as it was 2 years ago. And also, here's a tip that I want to share. Think about related interest groups that you can contact, maybe say to go speak at one of their events, because don't forget, you get to bill yourself as author John Doe. Here's an example. One of my clients wrote a book about her 7th great-grandmother, so great, whatever. Her 7th great-grandmother, a great Cherokee woman who had ties to Daniel Boone and George Washington. So I have contacted museums, I've contacted Cherokee-specific groups. We've done things with the Daughters of the American Revolution. You have to expand your view of your potential audience. So think of who are interest groups that you can get in touch with. Like I said, it could be to go to a book signing at their museum, or it could be I'm going to go give a talk to people who are interested in that era of history. And then the final tip I'll give is getting back to promotional items, like I was saying for filmmakers. This same client, she gives away, you might consider it a bookmark possibly, but it's actually a feather. So again, that ties into the whole Native American theme. So, you know, instead of giving someone a koozie that has your film title on it, how is that koozie going to make someone think of your film? It doesn't. But there's the feather that draws in the Native American theme, and people say, oh, okay, I get it. Or the screwdriver example I gave. Oh yeah, that's the film where the killer always stabs someone with a screwdriver. So
actually, and somebody else wanted you to address what elements of a book or a film make it easier to promote. And I think you touched on it a teeny bit. Not that people should necessarily say, well, I want to make my book timely, particularly, or like you can't warp your fiction. But can you talk about the elements of a book or film that naturally make it easier for you to reach out to people about?
Sure. And the first thing I want you to think of when you're doing this, the best example I can use here of what is going to get someone's attention to think about what they do in the TV news right before they go to a commercial. They say, coming up after the break, we'll tell you about something in your refrigerator that could land you in the hospital. that really grabs your attention because you almost want to yell back at the TV and no, just tell me no, don't go to commercial. and that's how it has to be with a book or a film. You need to think in terms of an elevator pitch. You know, what is the hook that's going to have that person say the magic words, which are tell me more. Mm-hmm. If you start hitting them with all this irrelevant information first, they're going to lose interest and tune you out. Now, let me clarify a bit on that. If it's a book, yes, ultimately you want to mention the publisher, assuming you didn't self-publish, because that lends credibility. Or if it's high on the Amazon charts, and I mean really high, not, well, my book is 417th in its category on Amazon, or if you have, 136 reviews of it on Amazon, yes, you eventually want to tell them that. But like I said, eventually, if it's a film project, don't be a walking spoiler alert. Mm-hmm. Hit them with what's going to get them to want to see your movie, or at least ask questions about it, so that they eventually find out themselves, what you don't want to reveal as a spoiler. But in either case, too, book or film, if you worked with someone real notable, getting back to the original question, that makes it easier to promote. If you worked on your film with, say, an award-winning sound designer, that's worth mentioning. But I want to clarify here, it better be an Academy Award or an Emmy Award, because if it's just something that no one has ever heard of and you get called out on it, they say, oh yeah, what award did he win? And then you tell them, it was the local newspaper's readers poll, then you're going to lose credibility. So, it's easier to promote if you can narrow down what that elevator pitch is. What is the thing, the TV news example, what's going to be the thing where they're going to say, tell me more. But also, if you have some of these things that are really going to get their attention, when I'm looking for guests for my podcast and I see the most recent episode that just came out, the guy worked with, an award-winning producer in Nashville, who has also worked with artists such as, those are things that's like, okay, it's going to be, I'll be honest with you, when I have guests that want to be on my podcast that are 17 years old, and they have 2 songs on Radio Disney. Yeah.
It's not much to talk about.
It's not that easy to promote. Yeah, there's not much. And here's a guy that has to fill 45 to 60 minutes. So, have kind of that, have different layers is what I'm encouraging you to do, so that you get the most important stuff right up front. That's going to make it easier to promote. So they'll say, tell me more. And then hit that second layer where they say, okay, you've got my attention, tell me more. And then you've got those things that are still going to make them say, all right, I'm still here. And eventually, if you can get down into that other stuff, then they really, but if you're, like I say, if you're that 17-year-old girl that has 2 songs on Radio Disney and they go, tell me more, you say,
I don't got any more.
Cool, I don't know what to tell you. It's like, well, okay.
That's that interview then.
Yeah, come back and see me in 4 years when you're 21 and you've released, an album and you're writing your second one.
So what I'd like you to do, if you don't mind, is touch briefly on, you have ebooks on your site. You have ebooks and stuff and resources as well as your podcast. which domain should people go to? Is it the Now Hear This podcast that you mentioned in your in the text message, or is it NHT? Can you go ahead? You want to put it at the bottom line again, just so people can actually see on the chat messages?
Yeah, so truth be told, and I would encourage you to do this as well, is to purchase multiple domains for different reasons. So it says there that if you go to brucesbonusbook.com, that's where you can find the ebooks. You could really go to nowhearthis.biz, and you'll eventually see the tab to click into for podcast. You'll see the tab to click into for store, or you'll actually see it'll say, I think, a featured product or our latest product or something like that, which is one of the ebook covers. But what I like to do to make it easier to get people right to the page I want them on, and I'm saying this not to self-promote, but to give you a tip, is when I promote my podcast, I don't want to tell people to go to my website and then look for the tab that's so since my podcast is called Now Hear This Entertainment, I just simply bought a domain name of nhte.net. And when people do that, it goes directly to the podcast page of my website. So make it as easy as you can for people to find exactly what you want them to get to. If you want ebooks, then I have brucesbonusbook.com, because that will land you on the page of my website where the ebooks are. And it just makes it that much closer to people doing what you want them to do, instead of, where am I supposed to look on this person's website? Now, I'll say one more thing. On that nowhearthis.biz, you'll see an article on there that says video consultations available. So if you read that, you'll find out about what I have if you want to book a 30 or 60-minute session with me. It's a nice little thing to have in your back pocket, so that if you just want someone to see the trailer, and you have the trailer for your film on a page that's not the homepage, or whatever the case is, if you're an author, but you have, andrewauthor.com as your website, and maybe the homepage is all about you and whatever, and there's one certain page of your website that's just for your book, I would encourage you to buy a separate domain name just for that book that goes to that page.
I think that's really smart, and I think you're right. brucesbonusbook.com. If people go to that right now, they can go ahead and get the books or the tips that you were talking about previously, which is kind of one of the focuses of this call. And it does make it easier for them to find it. And then if they want to go when they go to listen to the podcast, which they should also do, they can go to the Now Hear This .biz page. So there's also, you did put your email address in the chat window, which is Bruce at now-hear-this.net. So, but that information will also be on the other two pages, so people can reach out to you if they have questions, and they can book a session with you where you can talk about sort of where they are in their career and what they want to achieve next.
Absolutely.
Is there if you have any questions, I've been taking a look and monitoring. I think we've been doing a pretty good job of answering questions all the way along, and usually people email me in advance. Is it okay if people reach out to you via email if they have any questions that they want to get answered based upon this call?
Absolutely, and I would just ask you to mention this this Zoom call that Nancy and I had, so that I know that that's how you found me.
Right, so that kind of gives you a context, as opposed to, they listen to a podcast like yesterday and that you recorded 3 months ago, and it's like, what are we talking about? Yeah, I've had that happen. That's pretty funny, actually. It's like, what did I say? I don't know. When did I say it even? I don't even remember that.
Well, and not to mention that, I don't want to repeat myself. So if someone contacts me and I don't know that where they came from, I might start going back through some of what I already talked about. And this way I know, cut to the chase, they've already heard it.
Right. And one of the people on the call asked the question, how you determine what to charge. And I'm assuming that you do that on the basis of, once you talk to somebody, you have a notion of what kind of services they need, and they give you an idea of what their budget is, and you kind of work from that.
For the most part, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, and just to, once again, if you go to brucesbonusbook.com, you can get the tips, and you'll also find information in the books that talk about how to book a session. And then you can send an email to bruce@now-hear-this.net. So I'm going to, based on our conversation previously, I'm going to go ahead and, with your permission, I'm going to take this video and I'm going to edit it up, and I will send you a link, and then I'll make it available to people going forward. I do support a lot of folks, and on a regular basis, people talk to me about how to do PR, or they don't know, they're looking for someone who will handle PR. They've got a budget for a film. The budget has in it a number, like a number they're supposed to spend on PR, and they have no idea where to spend that money. So with your permission, I'll go ahead and make this available going forward to the folks that I support. I want to thank you very much for taking the time to meet with us today. You are truly very, very, very kind to spend so much time.
My pleasure.
Excellent. All right. Thank you very much, everyone. I hope you have a most excellent day, and email me if you have any questions at nancy.fulton@yahoo.com, for which I profoundly apologize. I could give you the other email addresses I have. The other thing is I have like 19 email addresses, which is so.
I was going to say, you have one that's at audioiron.com.
Right, because I have a podcast that I intermittently run, nancy@audioiron.com. And one of the things one of my difficulties is I really, 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 you were mentioning the fact that you like to help people. I really, 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 really like to help people. So if you were to go to audioiron.com, you could actually look through and see original media that I've created. I've done like full cast audio dramas. I've done full cast 90-minute audio dramas. No one does that. I am the only one who thinks that's a good idea. But I like it, and it's. I'm a screenwriter. I do have all the stuff that I do, but when I find myself routinely coming back to the fact that it's so interesting to help people build their careers. So I end up spending more time doing that than I do on my own original media, even though I like doing original media. I love working with actors. I love being in a studio recording stuff. I love shooting films, but when push comes to shove, when somebody tells you, the media that they're working on, and you think, well, I could help you do that, or wait, I know exactly what you have to do. It's just, I don't know. It's an addiction, I have to say. And I know you were telling me that too. You talk about the fact that ultimately you could choose to create a product. You personally could choose to create a product that you just spend all your time promoting. And yet what you prefer to do is work with people, with media creators to help them sell their products and services. So there's a reason why you're not making a new form of rat trap that you're promoting,
Well, we're living in a time, where there's a lot of great content being created, and we have the ability to not only create that content, but we have so many unique ways in the 21st century where we can get the word out about it. So it is fun to be a part of everybody else's content instead of just my own.
Right. And I also think there's something to be said for the fact that the people that you choose to help and the people that you choose to promote, and in itself is a form of creation. Like Johnny Carson, who he chose to book on his show, who he chose to focus on, and who he chose to feature. That was part of his voice. So I think there's something to be said for the fact that, you don't take every single client that approaches you. You mentioned that when we first met. You said, there's some people that I don't like their work, and I'm not going to support them.
Yeah.
So we make choices, to define our careers. So thank you so much. You're an amazing person. If you have any questions, you guys all know where to find him, or you can email me and I'll provide the information. And if you look in the chat message, you can see we had a lot of thank yous, which is always kind. I hope you guys have the most amazing day, everyone. Talk to you soon.